My parents canceled my birthday just so my sister could go on a date. What they didn't see coming was me canceling something way bigger, their mortgage payment. In the end, I canceled everything. You know that feeling when words hit you like a physical blow? Like a cold, hard slap across the face? That's exactly how it felt when my mother, Linda, stood there in our kitchen utterly serious and said, "Samantha, we're canceling your birthday party. Madison has a date with the mayor's son tonight, and we need to focus on that instead." My own mother, postponing my 25th birthday celebration as casually as if she were changing dinner plans. Behind her, my younger sister Madison actually smirked, adjusting the designer dress I'd unknowingly helped pay for. They had no idea I'd been covering their mortgage for the past 18 months. And what they were about to discover was that some decisions, some acts of casual cruelty, have consequences they never ever saw coming. The morning of September 15th, my 25th birthday, started like any other Saturday in the Henderson household. I woke up early in my childhood bedroom, the same room I'd been stuck in for 2 years since moving back home to help the family through temporary financial difficulties. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was 25, living at home, the primary breadwinner for a family that most days seemed to forget I even existed. I went downstairs expecting the usual birthday morning chaos. Growing up, my parents had always made birthdays special. Streamers, my mom's famous chocolate chip pancakes, that buzz of excitement when you're celebrating someone you love. Instead, I found my mother frantically arranging white roses in crystal vases, while my dad, Robert, polished silver that hadn't seen daylight in years. "Morning, Mom," I said, pouring myself coffee from the expensive machine I'd bought them last Christmas. "The flowers are beautiful. Are those for tonight?" My mother barely glanced up. "Oh, Samantha. Yes, these are for Madison's dinner. We want everything to be perfect when Marcus arrives." Marcus Wellington III, the mayor's 28-year-old son, who had recently decided my 23-year-old sister was worth his time. Madison had been floating on cloud nine for a week, and my parents were equally thrilled, practically seeing dollar signs and social climbing opportunities they dreamed of for years. "That's nice," I replied, the words feeling flat in my mouth. I just waited for someone to acknowledge what day it was. "So what time should I expect everyone for my party tonight?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. My mother's hands froze on the roses. My father looked up from the silver tray he'd been buffing. And then Madison appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a cream-colored Chanel dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "About that, sweetheart," my mother began, her voice taking on that particular saccharine tone she used when she was about to disappoint me but wanted to soften the blow. "We've been thinking, and we believe it would be best to postpone your celebration." I set my coffee mug down carefully, the ceramic making a soft, deliberate click against the granite counter. "Postpone it. Just until next weekend," my father added quickly, as if a week's delay would make any of this reasonable. "You understand, don't you? Madison's dinner with Marcus is incredibly important. The Wellingtons are pillars of this community, and if this relationship develops..." He didn't need to finish. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. Madison was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who would marry well and elevate the family. I was the practical one, the reliable one, the one who worked 60-hour weeks in corporate finance and handed over most of my paycheck to keep our family afloat. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," my mother continued, returning to her flowers with renewed vigor. "The Wellingtons have invited Madison to join them for dinner at the country club, and Marcus wants to bring her back here for dessert. We need the house to be absolutely perfect." Madison finally chimed in, her voice dripping with that sweet, innocent tone that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. "I'm sure you understand, Sam. You've always been so mature about these things. Besides, 25 isn't really a milestone birthday, is it? It's not like you're turning 30 or getting married or anything important like that." The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. Not because it was malicious, but because Madison genuinely didn't see anything wrong with what she was saying. In her world, her needs had always taken precedence. Everyone else's wants and feelings were secondary considerations. "I've already called the caterer," my mother added, sealing the deal. "They're bringing everything here instead of to the rental hall. The menu will be more sophisticated for Marcus anyway." I stood there trying to process it all. The caterer I had paid for. The rental hall I had put a deposit on. The birthday celebration I had been looking forward to for weeks. Not because I needed a party, but because it represented one day where I might be the center of attention in a family that had overlooked me for most of my life. "What about our guests?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady. "Aunt Carol is driving up from Philadelphia. My college friends took time off work. Jenny even flew in from Chicago. We'll call everyone," my father assured me, waving his hand dismissively. "They'll understand. Family comes first, and Madison's future is at stake here." Madison's future. Always Madison's future. Never mind the fact that I was the one ensuring we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. For 2 years, I'd watched my parents dote on my sister while treating me like a live-in ATM. Madison's credit card bills, Madison's car payments, Madison's designer wardrobe. All subsidized by my salary while she worked part-time at a boutique, which was more hobby than career. "The house needs to be perfect," my mother stressed again. "Absolutely perfect. The Wellingtons have such high standards, and first impressions matter so much. Madison, darling, you should go get your hair done. I made you an appointment at that salon downtown. The salon that charged $300 for a cut and style. The salon that would be paid for with money I transferred to their account every month. I watched my family orchestrate the destruction of my birthday with the same enthusiasm they had once put into planning it. The efficiency was remarkable. In the span of 10 minutes, they had dismantled weeks of preparation and rearranged their priorities without a second thought about how it might affect me. I need to make some calls, I said finally. Oh good, my mother replied, relief evident in her voice. I knew you'd be understanding about this. You always are. Can you handle calling the guests? I need to focus on getting everything ready here. I nodded and walked back upstairs to my room, closing the door behind me. But I wasn't planning to call my guests to cancel. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, logging into the online banking system I used to manage not just my finances, but my family's as well. For 18 months, I had been making their mortgage payments, $3,000 every month transferred from my account to theirs because my father's small accounting practice wasn't generating enough income, and my mother's part-time work at the local library barely covered groceries. They had come to me with tears in their eyes, explaining how they might lose the house that had been in our family for 15 years. I had stepped in without hesitation, the way I always did. I rearranged my own life, moved back home to save on rent, and quietly became the financial backbone of a family that seemed to forget I existed whenever something more interesting came along. But as I stared at the upcoming automatic transfer scheduled for tomorrow, September 16th, a different kind of clarity settled over me. They wanted to cancel my birthday for Madison's date. They thought my feelings were less important than impressing the mayor's son. I clicked into the transfer settings and paused the automatic payment. Then I opened a new browser window and searched for apartments in downtown Hartford. It was time for some changes in the Henderson household. Changes that would help my family understand the true value of priorities. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Jenny. Asterisk can't wait for tonight. Just landed at Bradley. Should I head straight to your house? Asterisk I smiled as I typed back. Asterisk change of plans. I'll pick you up in an hour. We're going to have a very different kind of celebration. Asterisk downstairs I could hear my mother directing my father on where to place the furniture for maximum impact when Marcus arrived. They were staging our home like a theater set, creating an illusion of effortless elegance that was only possible because of the money I contributed every month. But tonight they would get exactly what they had planned for. A perfect evening focused entirely on Madison. And tomorrow they would begin to understand what happened when they took the person who held their world together for granted. I closed my laptop and began packing a bag. After all, I had some apartment viewings to schedule. I picked up Jenny from Bradley International Airport in my reliable Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving for 6 years, while Madison cruised around in the BMW convertible our parents had somehow managed to lease for her 21st birthday. Jenny threw her arms around me the moment she walked through the arrival's gate, her vibrant red hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the terminal windows. "Happy birthday, financial wizard," she exclaimed, using the nickname she'd given me in college when I'd helped half our dorm create budgets and avoid credit card debt. "I brought you something amazing from Chicago. This boutique chocolatier that just opened in Lincoln Park." As we drove toward Hartford, I found myself telling Jenny the whole story, not just about this morning's birthday cancellation, but about everything that had led to this moment. She listened with the kind of focused attention that reminded me why we'd remained close friends despite living in different cities. "Wait," she interrupted as we merged onto a 91. "You've been paying their mortgage for how long?" 18 months, I confirmed, navigating around a slow-moving truck. "Ever since Dad's business started struggling and Mom cut her hours at the library to help Madison with her modeling career." Jenny snorted. Modeling career? The girl who did one local department store catalog. The absurdity of it struck me. Madison had done exactly one professional photo shoot for a regional clothing chain, earning maybe $800 total. But somehow that had been enough for our parents to justify her reducing her work schedule at the boutique to pursue opportunities in the industry. Meanwhile, I had been pulling 60-hour weeks at Hartwell & Associates, one of Connecticut's premier financial consulting firms, building a reputation as the go-to analyst for complex corporate restructuring. "Tell me about this job of yours," Jenny said as we exited toward downtown Hartford. "Last I heard, you were just an associate." I felt a small surge of pride. I became a senior analyst last year. I'm the youngest person at the firm to handle major client portfolios independently. My specialty is saving companies from bankruptcy, restructuring debt, renegotiating terms, finding hidden assets. Ironically, I'm apparently better at saving other people's financial lives than I am at protecting my own. What I didn't tell Jenny, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd been quietly building my own consulting practice on the side. 3 evenings a week and most weekends, I worked with smaller businesses and individuals who couldn't afford Hartwell's premium rates. Word of mouth had been spreading steadily. I had developed a reputation for being able to untangle the most complicated financial messes with creativity and discretion. The side practice had been born out of frustration with my family's situation. Watching my parents make increasingly poor financial decisions while relying on my income had taught me how many people struggled with money management due to emotional decision-making rather than mathematical ignorance. I found genuine satisfaction in helping people understand their options and regain control of their financial lives. "So you're basically a financial superhero," Jenny observed as we pulled into the parking garage of the downtown Marriott, where I'd made a reservation. "And your family has no idea." That was the crux of it. My parents saw me as their reliable, steady daughter who would always be there to clean up messes. They had no concept of my professional reputation, my growing network of contacts, or the fact that I had been carefully building a safety net for myself while supporting them. They certainly had no idea that I had been documenting every financial transaction for the past 2 years. Every mortgage payment, every credit card bill I'd covered, every emergency expense that had somehow fallen to me. As a financial professional, I understood the importance of maintaining detailed records. As their daughter, I had trusted that documentation would never be necessary. We checked into the hotel and sat in the elegant lobby bar where Jenny insisted on ordering champagne despite my protests. "You're going to tell me the whole story," she declared, raising her glass. "Start from the beginning. When did you become the family ATM?" The story went back further than the mortgage payments. It had started in college, actually, when Madison had somehow managed to max out a credit card our parents had given her for emergencies only. The card had been used for everything except emergencies. Spring break trips, designer clothes, expensive dinners with friends. When the bills came due, I had been the one with a work-study job and careful spending habits. I had covered the minimum payments until Madison could figure something out. Madison never figured anything out. The pattern was established early. Madison would create financial chaos through impulsive decisions, our parents would panic about the consequences, and I would quietly solve the problem. Over the years, the problems had grown larger, and my solutions more complex. The mortgage situation started when Dad lost his biggest client, I explained to Jenny. Henderson Accounting Services had been handling the books for this mid-sized manufacturing company for 12 years. The company was sold to a larger corporation that brought in their own accounting firm. Dad lost about 40% of his income overnight. "That's rough," Jenny acknowledged. "But couldn't he have found other clients?" I sipped my champagne, tasting the bitter irony along with the bubbles. "He could have if he'd been willing to adapt. But Dad's been doing business the same way for 20 years. He doesn't understand digital marketing. He's never built an online presence, and he refuses to learn new software. His remaining clients are all small, local businesses that barely generate enough revenue to cover his office rent. The real problem was that my father had always been more interested in maintaining the appearance of success than in actually building a sustainable business. He drove a leased Cadillac he couldn't afford, maintained an office in an expensive building to impress clients, and spent money on country club memberships and charity galas that were supposed to generate networking opportunities, but never seemed to produce actual business. "What about your mom?" Jenny asked. "Mom's always been the enabler," I said, finishing my champagne and signaling for another round. "She worked full-time when Madison and I were younger, but once we were in high school, she decided she wanted to pursue her passion for literature. She got a part-time job at the library, which barely covers groceries, and spends most of her time in book clubs and volunteer organizations. The volunteer work was meaningful to my mother, and I didn't begrudge her the desire to contribute to the community, but she had also developed expensive tastes over the years. She insisted on organic everything, shopped at boutique stores instead of regular grocery chains, and had a weakness for home decor that she justified as investing in our property values. So essentially," Jenny summarized, "your parents have been living beyond their means for years, and when reality caught up with them, they turned to you instead of making actual changes." "Exactly, and I enabled it because I thought it was temporary. I thought they would use the breathing room I was providing to make smart decisions and get back on their feet. Instead, they had used my financial support as permission to continue their unsustainable lifestyle. Worse, they had extended that lifestyle to Madison, who had learned to see money as something that magically appeared when needed, rather than something that had to be earned through work and careful planning." "Tell me about Madison's date tonight," Jenny said. "What's so special about this Marcus guy?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus Wellington III. His father is the mayor. His family owns half the commercial real estate in Westfield, and his trust fund is probably worth more than I'll make in my entire career. Madison met him at some charity auction last month. "Let me guess," Jenny said. "Your parents see dollar signs. They see social elevation." Mom's been fantasizing about Madison marrying into the Wellington family since the second date. They imagine themselves at country club events, charity galas, political fundraisers. All the circles they've always wanted to move in, but could never afford to access. The cruel irony was that my parents had no idea I already moved in those circles professionally. My work at Hartwell had brought me into contact with some of the wealthiest and most influential families in Connecticut. I had restructured finances for people who made the Wellingtons look middle class. But because my interactions were professional rather than social, because I wore conservative suits instead of designer gowns, my parents couldn't see the level of success I had achieved. "So tonight," I continued, "they're rolling out the red carpet for Marcus's visit. Fresh flowers, good china, probably a menu that costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month. All designed to impress a young man who probably won't even notice the details they're obsessing over." Jenny shook her head. "And they canceled your birthday for this performance." "They canceled my birthday," I agreed. "But they have no idea what else they canceled along with it." I pulled out my phone and showed Jenny the email I had received that afternoon from a potential client. A struggling tech startup that needed help restructuring their debt before their next funding round. The consultation fee alone would cover 3 months of my parents' mortgage payments. "I was planning to take this meeting on Monday," I said, "but now I think I'll schedule it for tomorrow instead. After all, I suddenly have a free evening." Jenny grinned. "I love it when you get that look in your eyes. What exactly are you planning?" I raised my champagne glass and toasted. "I'm planning to give my family exactly what they asked for. A perfect evening focused entirely on Madison's future." But I'm also planning to show them what happens when they take their foundation for granted. Outside the hotel windows, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across Hartford's downtown streets. In a few hours, my family would be hosting their impressive dinner for Marcus Wellington III, using money I had provided and resources I had made possible. Tomorrow, they would begin to understand the difference between foundation and facade. The first sign that something was fundamentally wrong with my family's priorities had come 6 months earlier, on a cold March evening. I just returned home from a particularly grueling day at Hartwell & Associates, having successfully negotiated a debt restructuring deal that saved a family-owned restaurant chain from bankruptcy. I was looking forward to a quiet dinner and maybe catching up on some reading. Instead, I found Madison in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags from Nordstrom, Saks, and several boutiques I recognized as being far beyond her part-time retail salary. She was trying on a pair of diamond earrings that caught the light from our crystal chandelier like tiny stars. "Those are beautiful," I had said, dropping my briefcase by the door. "Special occasion?" Madison had looked up with that bright, guileless smile that had charmed everyone since she was 3 years old. "Marcus took me shopping." Well, not exactly together, but he mentioned that I have excellent taste and should trust my instincts more. So, I decided to upgrade my jewelry collection. The earrings, I would later discover, cost $3,200. Madison had charged them to a credit card that was supposed to be for emergencies only, a card whose monthly payments I had been unknowingly covering for the past year. That night, I had done something I'd never done before. I logged into my parents' financial accounts where I was listed as an authorized user specifically, so I could manage their mortgage payments and major expenses. What I found was a masterclass in financial irresponsibility that went far beyond anything I had imagined. The emergency credit card wasn't the only one. Madison had somehow acquired 3 additional cards, all linked to my parents' accounts, all carrying balances that totaled nearly $47,000. The purchases ranged from the ridiculous to the absurd. An $1,800 handbag for networking events, a $2,400 weekend getaway to Martha's Vineyard with friends, a $900 facial treatment at a luxury spa in Greenwich. But the credit cards were just the beginning of what I uncovered during my late-night investigation. My father's business account showed a pattern of declining revenue that he had been hiding from the family for over 2 years. Instead of cutting expenses or finding new clients, he had been taking cash advances and small business loans to maintain the illusion of stability. My mother's spending had also escalated dramatically. Her small purchases at the organic grocery store were running $400, $500 per week. She had joined an expensive wine club, signed up for premium streaming services, and was paying for a personal trainer 3 times a week. Each expense was relatively modest on its own, but together they created a hemorrhage of money that my parents seemed completely unable to acknowledge. The most disturbing discovery was a file folder I found in my father's home office labeled Investment Opportunities. Inside were brochures for timeshare properties, cryptocurrency schemes that were obviously fraudulent, and promotional materials for a multi-level marketing company that sold overpriced nutritional supplements. My father had apparently invested $12,000 in various get-rich-quick schemes over the past 18 months. I spent the next 3 weeks quietly documenting everything. As a financial analyst, I knew the importance of having complete information before making any decisions. I created spreadsheets tracking every expense, every payment, every transfer. I researched the true value of their assets, the terms of their loans, and the realistic timeline for financial recovery if they were willing to make serious changes. The picture that emerged was devastating. My parents weren't just struggling with temporary cash flow problems. They were on a trajectory toward complete financial ruin. Without my monthly contributions, they would lose the house within 6 months. With my contributions, they were simply delaying the inevitable while making the eventual crash even more catastrophic. But what truly opened my eyes was discovering Madison's career planning folder on the family computer. She had created elaborate presentations about her modeling prospects, complete with projected earnings that bore no relationship to reality. She had calculated the cost of professional headshots, portfolio development, and travel to casting calls in New York and Los Angeles. The total budget for her first year of serious modeling was $34,000. She had also been researching plastic surgery procedures. Nothing major, she had noted in her careful handwriting, just some minor enhancements to make her more competitive in the industry. The consultation fees alone would cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The final straw came when I discovered that Madison had been forging my signature on financial documents. She had applied for a personal loan using my credit score and employment information, listing me as a co-signer without my knowledge. The loan application had been rejected, thankfully, but only because the lender had called to verify my employment, and I had been confused enough by their questions to investigate further. When I confronted Madison about the forged application, her response was breathtaking in its casualness. "I knew you wouldn't mind," she had said, filing her nails while sitting on her bed surrounded by fashion magazines. "You're always helping with money anyway. I just thought this would be easier than asking." She genuinely didn't understand why I was upset. In her mind, my resources were family resources, available for her use whenever she decided she needed them. The concept that I might have my own financial goals, my own dreams that required money to achieve, had never occurred to her. That conversation had taken place in May. Since then, I had been watching my family with new eyes, documenting not just their financial decisions, but their attitudes and assumptions. I started keeping a journal, recording the casual comments that revealed how they really saw me and my role in their lives. Samantha will handle it, was my mother's response to every financial stress. Samantha is so good with money, my father would say when justifying purchases he couldn't afford. Samantha doesn't mind, Madison would declare when she needed someone to cover her expenses. They weren't just taking my money, they were taking my agency, my identity, my right to make my own choices about my own life. I had become a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. The breaking point had been building for months, but I might have continued enabling them indefinitely if not for a conversation I overheard 2 weeks before my birthday. Madison had been on the phone with her friend Ashley, discussing Marcus Wellington's romantic interest in her. The timing is perfect, Madison had said, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls of our house. Mom and Dad are so desperate for me to marry well that they'll do anything to make sure Marcus is impressed. They're already talking about canceling Samantha's birthday party if it conflicts with the date. Can you imagine? Like, anyone cares about Samantha's birthday anyway. Ashley's response was muffled, but Madison's laugh was crystal clear. Oh, Samantha won't care. She never cares about that stuff. She's too practical to get upset over a party. Besides, this could change our family's entire social status. Samantha should be grateful to contribute to something so important. I had stood frozen in the hallway, listening to my sister dismiss my feelings and my worth with such casual cruelty. But what hurt more than her words was the realization that she was probably right about my parents' willingness to sacrifice my birthday for her dating prospects. That night I had called my college friend Rachel, who worked as a private investigator in Boston. I asked her to recommend someone local who could help me document my family's financial situation with legal precision. I wasn't planning to take them to court, but I wanted records that would be admissible if the situation ever escalated to that point. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chan, had been thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she had provided me with a comprehensive report that confirmed everything I had discovered and revealed several additional problems I had missed. My parents had taken out a second mortgage on the house without telling me, using the money to consolidate debt that had since been run up again. They had also borrowed against my father's life insurance policy and were behind on payments to the IRS. Your family is in serious financial trouble, Patricia had told me during our final meeting. But more importantly, they're in serious denial. These aren't people who are going to change their behavior voluntarily. They're going to keep spending and borrowing until something forces them to stop. I thanked Patricia for her work and filed her report in my home safe along with copies of all the financial documents I had gathered. I wasn't sure when or how I would use the information, but I knew it was important to have a complete picture of the situation. The irony was that I had become an expert at saving other people's finances while allowing my own family to manipulate and exploit me. I could restructure million-dollar corporate debts, but I couldn't seem to establish healthy boundaries with the people who were supposed to love me most. Now, sitting in the Hartford Hotel with Jenny, watching the sun set over the city where I had built my professional reputation, I finally understood what had to happen. My family needed to learn the same lesson I taught my corporate clients. Consequences are the only thing that creates lasting change. So what's the plan? Jenny asked, refilling our champagne glasses. I smiled, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow morning, my parents are going to discover that their mortgage payment has been rejected by the bank. They're going to panic. They're going to call me. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not going to rush in to fix their problem. And then we'll see how important family priorities really are when the foundation starts to crumble. While my family prepared for Madison's dinner with Marcus Wellington III, I was orchestrating something far more sophisticated than they could have imagined. Jenny and I spent Saturday evening in my hotel suite, laptops open, spreadsheets displayed, planning what would essentially become a masterclass in strategic financial intervention. You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? Jenny observed, watching me navigate through multiple banking interfaces with practiced efficiency. Since the moment I found Madison's forged loan application, I admitted, pulling up a detailed timeline I had been developing for months. I realized then that this situation would never resolve itself naturally. They needed consequences, not just conversations. The beauty of my plan lay in its simplicity and legality. I wasn't stealing money or manipulating accounts that belonged to someone else. I was simply withdrawing my own financial support in a strategic sequence that would demonstrate exactly how dependent my family had become on my income. The mortgage payment was just the beginning. Over the past 18 months, I had been covering far more than my parents realized. Their car insurance, their health insurance premiums, the property taxes on the house, Madison's car payment, even the monthly fees for services they considered essential: Netflix, Spotify, the lawn care service, the house cleaning lady who came twice a month. Look at this, I said, showing Jenny a spreadsheet that broke down every expense I had been covering. They think I just help with the mortgage, but I've been subsidizing their entire lifestyle. Watch what happens when I stop. I had already contacted my insurance agent and removed my parents' vehicles from my policy. Effective Monday morning, they would receive notice that their coverage had lapsed and would need to secure new insurance immediately or risk having their licenses suspended. The cost would be nearly double what they had been paying through my group rate. Next, I logged into the property tax system for Westfield. My parents believed their property taxes were automatically deducted from their mortgage payment, but that had stopped being true 6 months ago when they refinanced. I had been paying the taxes separately to prevent penalties. The next payment was due in 10 days, and without it, the town would begin lien proceedings against the house. This is brilliant, Jenny said, reading over my shoulder. You're not hurting them. You're just removing your subsidies. Exactly. They're going to learn very quickly what their actual cost of living is without my financial support, and they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about priorities. But the mortgage payment timing was the most crucial element of my strategy. I had deliberately waited until the day after it was due to cancel the automatic transfer. This meant that when the bank processed the payment and found insufficient funds in my parents' account, they would immediately send a notice of default. My parents would have exactly 10 days to bring their account current before the bank could begin foreclosure proceedings. The psychological impact would be devastating. My parents had never missed a mortgage payment in their lives. They prided themselves on their responsible homeownership, their good credit, their standing in the community. Receiving that first notice of default would shatter their sense of security in a way that no conversation ever could. What about Madison's car? Jenny asked, scrolling through my detailed expense breakdown. I smiled. Madison's BMW convertible was financed through a lease that I had co-signed and been paying for the past 2 years. The lease agreement included specific terms about insurance, maintenance, and usage. Madison had violated several of these terms. She had gotten 2 speeding tickets that increased the insurance premiums, she had exceeded the annual mileage limit, and she had caused minor damage to the passenger side door that she had never reported or repaired. I'm not going to cancel her car payment immediately, I explained. That would be too obvious. Instead, I'm going to let the leasing company discover the violations. They'll demand immediate payment of the penalties and damages, plus increased insurance coverage. The total will be about $8,000, due within 30 days. And if they can't pay, the car gets repossessed. Madison will have to find alternative transportation to her dates with Marcus. I had also been paying for Madison's cell phone, her gym membership, her subscription boxes, and her Amazon Prime account. Each of these would be canceled systematically over the next 2 weeks, creating a cascade of small inconveniences that would gradually build into a clear picture of exactly how much I had been subsidizing her lifestyle. The most sophisticated part of my plan involved my father's business. Henderson Accounting Services was hemorrhaging money, but my father had been hiding this from potential clients by maintaining an expensive office lease and professional appearances that he couldn't afford. I had been subsidizing these costs indirectly by covering his personal expenses, allowing him to pour his business income into maintaining an illusion of success. Through my professional network, I had learned that several of my father's remaining clients were considering switching to larger accounting firms that could provide more comprehensive services. I had also discovered that 2 of his clients were behind on their own payments to him, creating cash flow problems he had been covering with credit card advances. I've been protecting him from the natural consequences of his business decisions, I told Jenny. He's been able to make poor choices because he knew I would cover the household expenses. Once I stop doing that, he'll have to choose between maintaining his expensive office image and keeping a roof over his family's head. I had already arranged for my own exit strategy. Through my side consulting practice, I had built relationships with several clients who had been asking me to take on larger projects. One client, a tech startup in Hartford, had offered me a contract position that would pay almost as much as my current salary at Hartwell & Associates, with the flexibility to work remotely and build my own practice on the side. You're going independent? Jenny asked when I explained the job offer. I've been planning this transition for 6 months. I have enough savings to cover my expenses for a full year and enough potential clients to build a sustainable practice. I was just waiting for the right moment to make the move. That moment had arrived with my canceled birthday party. The symbolic rejection of my value to the family had finally given me permission to prioritize my own future over their immediate needs. I had also been strategic about apartment hunting. The downtown Hartford loft I had viewed that afternoon was perfect, close to my new clients' offices, spacious enough for a home office, and available for immediate occupancy. The lease terms were flexible, the building was modern and secure, and the monthly rent was actually less than what I had been contributing to my parents' household expenses. When do you move? Jenny asked. I can sign the lease tomorrow if I want it. The landlord already approved my application based on my credit score and employment verification. I could be completely moved out by next weekend. The timing was crucial. I wanted to be physically removed from the house before my family fully understood what was happening. I didn't want to be present for the initial panic, the pleading, the attempts to guilt me into resuming my financial support. I needed distance to maintain my resolve, but I also wanted them to have time to process the situation and potentially make better choices. If they responded to the crisis by cutting expenses, finding additional income, and treating me with the respect I deserved, I would consider resuming some limited financial assistance. If they responded with manipulation, blame, and demands that I sacrifice my future for their comfort, I would know that permanent separation was the only healthy option. What about Madison's dinner tonight? Jenny asked, bringing me back to the immediate situation. I checked my watch. It was nearly 7 o'clock. Marcus Wellington III would be arriving at my parents' house soon, expecting to find a perfectly orchestrated evening designed to impress him and his family. My parents had spent the entire day preparing, using money I had provided and resources I had made possible. Tonight they get exactly what they wanted, I said, closing my laptop with satisfaction. A perfect evening focused entirely on Madison's future prospects. Tomorrow they start learning about consequences. I had even planned a small gift for the occasion. Earlier that afternoon, I had arranged for a bottle of expensive champagne to be delivered to the house with a note. Asterisk, congratulations on prioritizing what matters most. Love, Samantha. Asterisk, my parents would interpret it as gracious acceptance of their decision to cancel my birthday. They had no idea it was actually a farewell gesture. Jenny raised her own champagne glass in a toast to strategic planning and natural consequences. To finally putting myself first, I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. Outside our hotel window, the lights of Hartford twinkled like stars, representing a future that was finally completely mine to choose. Sunday morning arrived with the jarring buzz of my phone at 6:04 a.m. I was still in the Hartford hotel suite, having enjoyed a peaceful night's sleep for the first time in months, when my mother's panicked voice shattered the quiet. Samantha, thank God you answered. We have an emergency. The bank called, saying our mortgage payment was rejected. There must be some kind of mistake with the automatic transfer. Can you check your account and fix this immediately? I sat up slowly, deliberately taking my time before responding. Through the hotel window, I could see the early morning sun casting long shadows across the city, painting everything in golden light. Felt symbolic somehow. The dawn of a new chapter. Good morning, Mom, I said calmly. How was Madison's dinner last night? The dinner was wonderful, but Samantha, this is serious. The bank is saying we have 10 days to bring the account current, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. This has to be an error. You've never missed a payment. You're right, I replied, getting out of bed and walking to the window. I have never missed a payment, but I also didn't make this month's payment. The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear my mother's shocked breathing through the phone. In the background, I could hear my father's voice asking urgent questions that my mother couldn't yet answer. What do you mean you didn't make the payment? She finally whispered. I mean exactly that. I canceled the automatic transfer yesterday morning. The payment that was supposed to be processed on Saturday didn't happen because I chose not to make it. But why? Is this about your birthday? Samantha, I know you were disappointed, but this is our house. You can't just stop paying the mortgage because you're upset about a party. The fact that she still didn't understand the fundamental issue was both infuriating and clarifying. This wasn't about a canceled birthday party. It was about years of being taken for granted, exploited, and treated as a financial resource rather than a family member deserving of respect. Put Dad on the phone, I said, and put me on speaker. We need to have a family meeting. I heard rustling sounds, footsteps, and then my father's voice strained with panic. Samantha, what's going on? Your mother says you didn't make the mortgage payment. That can't be right. It's completely right, Dad. I also canceled your car insurance, which expires tomorrow. The property taxes are due in 9 days, and I won't be paying those either. Madison's car lease has some violations that need to be addressed immediately, and her cell phone service will be disconnected on Tuesday. The explosion of voices was immediate and overlapping. My mother was asking how I could do this to them. My father was demanding explanations, and I could hear Madison in the background, crying about her phone and her car. The chaos was exactly what I had expected, but experiencing it felt strangely liberating rather than upsetting. Let me explain something to all of you, I said, raising my voice to cut through their panic. For the past 18 months, I have been covering approximately $4,800 per month in your expenses. That includes the mortgage, insurance, taxes, and various other costs that you've either forgotten about or never realized I was handling. $4,800? My father repeated, his voice faint. Every month. I have detailed records of every payment, every transfer, every bill I've covered. I also have documentation of the additional $47,000 in credit card debt that Madison has accumulated, the failed business investments you've made, Dad, and the loans you've taken against the house without telling me. I heard Madison gasp. How do you know about my credit cards? Because I'm listed as an authorized user on the accounts where the bills get paid. Because I'm a financial analyst who notices when $3,200 diamond earrings appear on statements. Because I've been subsidizing your entire lifestyle, while you all pretended I was just helping out occasionally. My mother's voice was shaking now. Samantha, even if you're upset with us, you can't just stop paying the mortgage. We'll lose the house. You might lose the house, I agreed. That depends entirely on the choices you make over the next 10 days. You could get second jobs, sell some of Madison's expensive purchases, take out a loan, or ask your wealthy new friends for help. You have options. You just haven't needed to explore them because I've been enabling your poor financial decisions. This is crazy. Madison's voice came clearly through the phone. Now you're being vindictive and cruel. All because we postponed your stupid birthday party. The casual dismissal of my feelings, even in the middle of a financial crisis, was exactly the confirmation I needed that I was making the right decision. Madison, I said, my voice deadly calm, your car is going to be repossessed within 30 days, unless someone pays $8,000 in penalties for the damage you've caused and the terms you violated. Your credit cards are maxed out on accounts that I've been paying minimum balances for. Your phone, your gym membership, your subscription boxes. All canceled. Your modeling career fund that you've been building with other people's money? That ends today. You can't do this to me. Marcus is taking me to dinner at the country club next weekend. I need my car. I need my phone. Then you need to figure out how to pay for them yourself, I suggested. Or ask Marcus for help. Or get a full-time job like most 23-year-olds. You have choices, Madison. You just haven't had to make them before. My father tried a different approach. Samantha, I understand you're angry, but let's be reasonable here. We can discuss changes to our arrangements, maybe set up a formal loan structure with interest payments, but you can't just pull the rug out from under us without warning. Without warning? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, I've been warning you for 2 years. Every time I suggested you find new clients instead of depending on my support. Every time I recommended that Madison get a real job instead of pursuing fantasy careers. Every time I pointed out that your expenses were unsustainable. You ignored every warning because it was easier to take my money than to make difficult changes. I could hear them conferring among themselves, trying to figure out how to handle this crisis. The irony was perfect. They were finally having the urgent financial planning conversation they should have been having for years. What do you want from us? My mother asked finally. I want you to learn to solve your own problems. I want Madison to understand that actions have consequences. I want Dad to either make his business profitable or find employment that covers his expenses. I want all of you to treat me like a family member instead of an ATM. And if we do that, you'll start helping again. My father asked hopefully. Maybe. Or maybe I'll decide that it's time for me to focus on my own future, instead of constantly rescuing you from yours. I've accepted a new job, Dad. I'm moving to Hartford, and I'm starting my own consulting practice. For the first time in my adult life, I'm going to prioritize my own goals. The silence that followed was heavy with shock. They had never considered the possibility that I might have my own ambitions, my own life to build. In their minds, I existed primarily to support their dreams and clean up their mistakes. You're moving out, my mother whispered. I'm moving on, I corrected. There's a difference. You can reach me at this number if you need to discuss truly important matters. But the era of me solving every problem and covering every expense is over. Samantha, please, Madison said, her voice now desperate rather than angry. I'm supposed to see Marcus again tomorrow night. I can't show up in Dad's old Honda. What will I tell him? You could tell him the truth, I suggested. That your family has been living beyond your means, and you're learning to be more responsible. Or you could ask him to pick you up. Or you could take an Uber. You have choices, Madison. You just haven't had to make them before. My father cleared his throat. What about the mortgage payment? Even if we accept everything else you're saying, we need time to figure this out. Can you just cover this month while we make arrangements? No, I said simply. You have 10 days to bring the account current. You have the same options that any other family in a financial crisis would have. You can ask relatives for help, take out a personal loan, sell possessions, or find additional income. The only thing you can't do is expect me to continue enabling your irresponsible choices. I could hear crying now, my mother's tears, Madison's sobs of frustration. But I also heard something else. My father's voice, quiet and thoughtful, as he began discussing actual solutions with my mother. For the first time in years, they were talking about cutting expenses instead of finding ways to increase their income through my contributions. I love all of you, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I won't sacrifice my future for your comfort anymore. You have 10 days to figure out the mortgage. Everything else gets resolved as you're able to manage it. I have confidence that you'll find a way. You just haven't needed to try before. I ended the call and immediately turned off my phone. Outside the hotel window, Hartford was fully awake now, bustling with Sunday morning activity. People were jogging along the riverfront. Families were heading to brunch. Couples were walking dogs through the historic district. All of them living their own lives, pursuing their own goals, making their own choices about how to spend their time and money. For the first time in years, I was about to join them. Jenny emerged from the bedroom, already dressed and holding 2 cups of coffee from the hotel's premium service. How did it go? Exactly as expected, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Panic, blame, desperation, and a complete failure to understand why I'm done enabling them. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously, looking out at the city that was about to become my new home. None at all. For the first time in my adult life, I feel free. By Wednesday morning, the Henderson family's carefully constructed world had begun to collapse in spectacular fashion. I was in my new Hartford apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and setting up my home office, when the first wave of consequences crashed over them like a tsunami. Jenny had stayed through Tuesday to help me move, and we were unpacking kitchen supplies when my phone started buzzing with messages. I had turned it back on to handle business calls, but the flood of texts from my family painted a vivid picture of their rapidly deteriorating situation. From my mother, Asterisk Insurance Company called. Cars aren't covered. Can't drive Madison to work. I need help immediately. Asterisk from my father. Asterisk the bank wants $3,047 to bring the mortgage current plus late fees. Don't have it. What do we do? Asterisk from Madison. Asterisk my phone got shut off in the middle of a call with Marcus. This is humiliating. Fix this now. Asterisk but the most revealing message came from my father's business partner Tony Ritchie, who had called me directly. Tony and my father had been running Henderson and Ritchie Accounting together for 3 years, though I had never been entirely clear on what Tony actually contributed to the partnership. Samantha, Tony said when I returned his call, I need to talk to you about your father's financial situation. He's been borrowing money from the business account to cover personal expenses, and now we can't make payroll for our employees. This was news to me. How much has he borrowed? $18,000 over the past 6 months. He kept saying it was temporary, that his daughter was helping with the family finances and he'd pay it back soon. But now he's saying you've cut him off. And frankly, the business can't survive this kind of drain. I felt a chill of realization. My father hadn't just been mismanaging his personal finances. He had been stealing from his business to maintain his lifestyle, using my mortgage payments as justification for his theft. Tony, I had no idea about any of this. My father never told me he was taking money from the business. Well, he needs to return it immediately, or I'm going to have to dissolve the partnership and report the missing funds. I've got 3 employees who depend on their paychecks, and I won't let them suffer because Robert can't manage his personal expenses. After hanging up with Tony, I sat in my new living room staring out at the Hartford skyline, trying to process the full scope of my father's deception. It wasn't just that he had been irresponsible with money. He had been actively dishonest with his business partner, his employees, and his family. My phone rang again. This time it was Marcus Wellington III himself. Miss Henderson? His voice was polite but confused. This is Marcus Wellington. I believe I've been dating your sister Madison. Yes, I know who you are, I replied, curious about why he would be calling me directly. I'm calling because Madison asked me to contact you about some financial difficulties your family is experiencing. She seems to think you might be able to help resolve some issues with her car and phone service. I almost laughed at the audacity. Madison had actually asked her new boyfriend to call me and request financial assistance on her behalf. Marcus, I appreciate you calling, but Madison's financial problems are her responsibility to solve. I'm no longer involved in managing my family's expenses. There was a pause. I see. Madison gave me the impression that this was some kind of temporary misunderstanding between siblings. She said you were just upset about a birthday party. Madison has a tendency to minimize complex situations. The reality is that my family has been living beyond their means for years, and I've decided to stop enabling that behavior. Ah. Marcus's tone shifted, becoming more thoughtful. That puts things in a different perspective. Madison mentioned that her family was well established financially. I gather that's not entirely accurate. I chose my words carefully. I think you should ask Madison to be more honest with you about her actual circumstances. She's a lovely person, but she's never had to face real financial responsibility. After we hung up, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. Marcus Wellington III wasn't looking for a charity case. He was looking for an equal partner from a stable, successful family. Madison's deceptions were about to catch up with her in ways she couldn't have anticipated. The next call came from my Aunt Carol in Philadelphia, who had driven up for my canceled birthday party, and was now staying with my parents to help manage the crisis. Samantha, Carol said, her voice tight with stress, I need you to understand what's happening here. Your parents are in complete panic. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since Sunday. Your father is talking about declaring bankruptcy. Madison locked herself in her room and won't come out. What about solutions? I asked. Are they taking any practical steps to address their problems? Your father went to 3 different banks trying to get a personal loan, but his credit is apparently much worse than anyone realized. Your mother called everyone she knows asking for money, which was humiliating for her. Madison applied for full-time jobs at 6 different places yesterday. This was progress, actually. For the first time in years, my family was facing reality and taking concrete action to solve their problems instead of expecting me to handle everything. Carol, they're doing exactly what they should be doing. These are the steps they should have taken years ago instead of relying on my income. But Samantha, they could lose the house. Your childhood home. That's possible, I agreed. It's also possible they'll find a way to save it. But either way, it won't be because I sacrificed my future to enable their poor decisions. Carol was quiet for a moment. I have to ask, are you really prepared to let them lose everything? It was a fair question, and one I had been wrestling with since Sunday. I'm prepared to let them face the natural consequences of their choices. If they lose the house, they can rent something smaller and more affordable. If Madison loses her car, she can take public transportation or save up for something she can actually afford. If Dad loses his business, he can find employment that provides steady income. And if they hate me for this, then I'll know that their love was conditional on my willingness to bankrupt myself for their comfort. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Madison appeared at my apartment building, looking disheveled and desperate. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see her, and after a moment's hesitation I agreed. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt instead of her typical designer outfits. Most tellingly, she had obviously been crying. Can I come up? She asked when I met her in the lobby. Of course. We rode the elevator to my floor in silence. When we reached my apartment, Madison looked around with obvious surprise at the modern, sophisticated space I had chosen for myself. This is really nice, she said quietly. Thank you. I've been saving for my own place for a long time. We sat in my living room and for several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally, Madison broke the silence. Marcus broke up with me today. I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. I'm sorry. What happened? He said he didn't appreciate being misled about our family's financial situation. Apparently, when his parents found out that our house might be foreclosed on, they told him he should date someone from a more stable background. Madison's voice was flat, defeated in a way I had never heard before. He was right to break up with me. I did mislead him. I've been pretending to be someone I'm not for so long that I forgot who I actually am. This was not the conversation I had expected to have with my sister. Madison, you're 23 years old. You have time to figure out who you want to be. But I don't know how to be responsible. I don't know how to live within my means. I've never had to try. She looked at me with something approaching respect for the first time in years. How did you learn all this stuff? How do you manage money and plan for the future and make it look so easy? It's not easy, I told her. Honestly, it requires discipline and sacrifice, and making choices about what's truly important. But it's also incredibly freeing to know that you can take care of yourself. Madison nodded slowly. I applied for a full-time job at a marketing company today. The salary is only $32,000, but they said if I work hard, I could advance pretty quickly. That's a good start. I also listed all my designer clothes and jewelry on consignment websites. The woman at the shop said I could probably get about $15,000 for everything, maybe more. I felt a surge of pride for my sister. These were exactly the kinds of difficult but necessary decisions she needed to make. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. Madison's expression darkened. Dad told Tony Ritchie that he'll pay back the money he borrowed, but he has no idea how. Mom is talking about selling her jewelry, and maybe getting a full-time job for the first time in 10 years. They're both angry at you, but they're also starting to realize how much you were doing for us. Are you angry at me? Madison considered the question seriously. I was. For the first few days I hated you. I thought you were being cruel and vindictive. But then I started thinking about how I would feel if someone treated me the way we've been treating you. She looked directly at me for the first time since arriving. We've been terrible to you. We took your money, your support, your sacrifice, and we never even said thank you. We just expected it like it was something we deserved instead of something you chose to give us. It was the most honest and mature thing I had ever heard my sister say. I don't hate you, Madison. I never did. I just couldn't continue enabling behavior that was hurting all of us. I know. She stood up to leave. I don't know if Mom and Dad will ever really understand what they did wrong, but I'm going to try to do better, starting with paying my own bills and cleaning up my own messes. After she left, I sat in my apartment feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope for my family's future. Not the future I had been financing and managing for them, but the future they might build for themselves if they were willing to do the work. Outside my windows, the lights of Hartford stretched out like a promise of possibility. For the first time since this whole situation began, I thought there might be a chance for genuine healing. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, I was preparing for the grand opening of Caldwell Financial Solutions when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, but I almost didn't recognize her voice when I answered. Samantha, it's Mom. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The tentative, respectful tone was completely different from the demanding panic I had heard in her voice during our last conversation in September. Something fundamental had shifted in our dynamic. Not at all, I replied, setting down the promotional materials I had been reviewing for my new office space. How are things going? Better than I expected, actually. I wanted to call and, well, there are some things I need to tell you. Things I should have said months ago. I settled into my desk chair, looking out at the Hartford business district where I had built my new life. In the 3 months since I had withdrawn my financial support, I had heard updates about my family through Aunt Carol and Madison, but this was the first direct communication from my mother. We saved the house, she said first. It took everything we had, and we had to make some major changes. But we brought the mortgage current with 2 days to spare. How did you manage that? Your father sold his Cadillac and bought a used Toyota. I sold all my jewelry except my wedding ring and my mother's pearl necklace. Madison contributed $12,000 from selling her clothes and accessories. And, she paused, her voice catching slightly, I took a full-time position at the regional library system. I'm now the head of their adult literacy program. I felt a surge of genuine pride. Mom, that's wonderful. You always loved that work. I do love it, and the salary is much better than I expected. Between my income and the money your father is finally making from his business, we can actually cover our expenses without, she trailed off. Without my help, I finished gently. Yes, and Samantha, I need you to know how ashamed I am that it took losing you to make us realize what we had been doing. We weren't just taking your money. We were taking your life, your dreams, your future. We treated you like a resource instead of our daughter. It was the apology I had been waiting to hear for years. But now that it had come, I found myself more focused on the changes she was describing than on my own vindication. What about Dad's business? That's actually going really well. Losing the partnership with Tony was devastating at first, but it forced your father to completely restructure how he operates. He moved to a smaller office, started using modern accounting software, and began offering virtual services to clients outside of Westfield. His revenue has actually increased by 30%. This was genuinely surprising. He adapted to digital services? My mother laughed and I could hear real joy in it. Madison taught him. She's been working as his part-time marketing coordinator while she finishes her business degree. Did you know she enrolled in night classes at the community college? I hadn't known that. What's she studying? Business administration with a focus on digital marketing. She says she wants to understand how money actually works instead of just spending it. She's completely changed, Samantha. She's working 40 hours a week at that marketing company, going to school 3 nights a week, and she's been saving money for the first time in her life. The transformation sounded almost too dramatic to believe, but my mother's voice carried conviction. She's been dating someone new too, my mother continued. A teacher she met in one of her business classes. He drives a 10-year-old Honda and lives in a small apartment. And Madison says she's never been happier. She told me that Marcus Wellington was attracted to what he thought our family represented, but David likes who she actually is. We talked for another 20 minutes, and with each update, I felt layers of old resentment beginning to dissolve. My family hadn't just survived the financial crisis I had created. They had used it as an opportunity to build something more authentic and sustainable. There's one more thing, my mother said as our conversation began to wind down. We'd like to invite you to Christmas dinner. Not because we need anything from you, but because we miss you. Because you're our daughter and we love you. And because we want to show you the people we've become. I'd like that, I said, meaning it completely. After we hung up, I sat in my office, thinking about the journey that had brought us all to this point. The dramatic confrontation that had started with a canceled birthday party had forced my entire family to confront fundamental truths about responsibility, respect, and authentic relationships. My own transformation had been just as profound. Caldwell Financial Solutions had grown from a side practice to a thriving consultancy, with 12 regular clients and a waiting list for new appointments. I specialized in helping people navigate financial transitions, divorces, career changes, family crises, entrepreneurial ventures. My reputation for combining technical expertise with emotional intelligence had spread throughout Connecticut's business community. More importantly, I had learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own needs without guilt. The apartment in Hartford had become a home where I felt genuinely comfortable and secure. I had joined a hiking club, taken up pottery classes, and started dating a fellow financial consultant I had met at a professional conference. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself while still maintaining the capacity to help others when I chose to do so. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's crisis had ultimately benefited everyone involved. My parents had discovered strengths and capabilities they never knew they possessed. Madison had learned to value authentic relationships over social performance. My father had modernized his business and found new success. My mother had returned to meaningful work that utilized her education and passions. And I had finally claimed the independence and respect I had been unconsciously seeking for years. On Christmas morning, I drove to Westfield for the first time since moving out. The house looked smaller somehow, but also warmer and more welcoming. There were no expensive decorations or elaborate displays, just simple, thoughtful touches that reflected my family's new appreciation for what they could actually afford. Madison answered the door, and I almost didn't recognize her. She looked healthy and confident in a way that had nothing to do with designer clothes or perfect makeup. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair was in a simple ponytail, and she was genuinely smiling. "Samantha," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "I can't wait for you to meet David. He's in the kitchen helping Dad with the turkey. Fair warning, they're both terrible cooks, but they're having so much fun trying." The scene in the kitchen was exactly as Madison had described. My father and a pleasant-looking young man in his late 20s were attempting to coordinate a holiday meal with the kind of enthusiastic incompetence that comes from genuine effort, rather than an expectation that someone else will handle the difficult parts. "Samantha," my father called out, wiping his hands on an apron that read, "World's okayest cook," clearly a gift that reflected his new, more realistic self-assessment. "Come settle an argument. David says we should baste the turkey every 30 minutes, but the recipe says every hour." "Every 30 minutes, I said, accepting a hug from my father that felt different than any embrace we had shared in years. There was respect in it, gratitude without desperation, and genuine affection that wasn't complicated by financial obligation. Dinner was imperfect and delicious. The turkey was slightly dry. The mashed potatoes were lumpy, and the green bean casserole was obviously from a recipe my mother had found online that morning. But the conversation was rich with stories about my family's new ventures, challenges they had overcome, and plans for a future they were building together. David turned out to be thoughtful and funny, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and being comfortable with that identity. He and Madison clearly adored each other, but their relationship was based on mutual respect and shared values rather than social ambition or financial convenience. "Madison tells me you're the one who finally taught her family about accountability," David said during dessert. "That must have been a difficult decision." "It was necessary," I replied, "but I never imagined it would lead to such positive changes for everyone. Sometimes people need a crisis to discover what they're really capable of," my mother said quietly. "We certainly did." As the evening wound down, my father pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Samantha, I need to say something that's long overdue. What I did to you, taking your money, your support, your sacrifice for granted, was wrong. Not just financially irresponsible, but morally wrong. You deserved better from us. And I'm sorry it took losing you to make me understand that. Thank you for saying that, Dad. I also want you to know that we're not going to ask you for money ever again. Not because we're proud or stubborn, but because we've learned that depending on you was preventing us from becoming the people we needed to be." He handed me an envelope. "This is our first payment toward repaying what we owe you. It's not much, only $500, but we're committed to paying back every dollar you spent supporting us, with interest." I looked at the check, feeling emotions I couldn't quite identify. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, we do," he interrupted firmly. "We absolutely do. Not because you need the money, but because we need to make this right. Because debts should be repaid. And because our relationship with you should be based on mutual respect, not financial obligation." When I left that evening, I carried with me something I hadn't expected to find. Genuine hope for my family's future, and real affection for the people they had become. 6 months later, I received another envelope from my parents. This one contained not just their monthly payment toward the debt they were repaying, but also a birthday invitation. Not for Madison this time, but for me. "We'd like to throw you a proper birthday celebration," my mother had written. Asterisk nothing elaborate or expensive. Just family and friends celebrating someone we love and respect, if you're willing to trust us with planning it. Asterisk I smiled, thinking about how far we had all traveled from that September morning when my birthday had been cancelled for Madison's date. The woman who had orchestrated such a dramatic intervention felt like a different person now, someone who had been trapped by her own enabling patterns, and had needed to break free as much as her family had needed to learn independence. Now looking back, I could see that canceling their mortgage payment hadn't been revenge at all. It had been the greatest gift I could have given my family. The opportunity to discover their own strength, capability, and authentic happiness. And in the process I had given myself the greatest gift of all. A life that was finally completely my own.